Hello, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in June. Okay, I'm trying out this new way of wrapping up the month, kind of like at a glance, but I'm still working on it. Here's kind of a printout of it. I had to print it in black and white, so it's not really as pretty as I designed it, but it tracks the books that I read, how many books got 5-star rating, if I read classics, nonfiction, any rereads, my favorite character, if I DNF'd any books, if a book was a physical book, ebook, audiobook, like how many of those I read. There's a section for my favorite book right here, and then what book of the month I would rewrite, reread, or burn. I can't say her last name. Jan Agaton? I probably just need to watch one of her videos and try to see how she pronounces it or how other people pronounce it. Agaton. That's probably wrong. Oh, you can see my mic. Oops. She does her whole month wrap up like that. She chooses 3 books and that's how she wraps up her books, which is really fun to watch. I don't necessarily want to wrap up all of my books like that, but I thought just for the month I would choose 3 books, one that I would reread, rewrite, and burn. So I'm working on this system. I still haven't even finished it for June, but let's get into the books that I read in June. I don't have all of them physically because if you don't know, if you haven't watched any of my videos, I recently moved to Turkey. My stuff is getting shipped to me and it should get here this month. I'm so excited to have a desk, to have my filming space. But let's get into the books. So I read 6 books in June. However, while looking at my reading tracker, oh, it's kind of dirty, I noticed that there are 2 books that I read in previous months that I didn't talk about. For some reason, I think they just, I don't know, slipped my mind. Or, I don't know, I'm really confused as to why I didn't talk about these books. But I'm going to start with those and then continue on with the books that I did read in June. The first book, I'm sorry if I am shaking the camera, I'm hoping I'm not, is Just Like Mother by Anne Heltzel. Now, this book is not what I thought it was at all. I thought this was going to be a scary baby robotic monster, this like baby that's created and then just is like a really scary baby. I was thinking kind of like Megan, like the Megan movie, but baby form. That is not what this book is. Now, in this book, we're following our protagonist who was in a cult when she was a child, and her cousin, or this other woman, I think they are cousins, it's been a while since I've read this, were both in that cult. And very early on in the book, they are reunited because they lost track of each other. Now they're reunited. Our character is going through some financial trouble, and her cousin is very wealthy due to creating these babies, these synthetic babies that help women go through grief of losing a child or preparation to becoming a mother. So they're kind of like training babies, either to help someone who maybe can't have children or lost a child or is preparing to have a child. So in that aspect, the babies are creepy and they're mentioned somewhat, but just not as much as I wanted. Now, my issue with this book is that my camera keeps sliding down. Stop. The discussions in this book are not bad discussions, but I think I just didn't want to read about them. We're talking about, women choosing to have children or not have children, a woman's role, like her cousin believes that is like a woman's job. The sole purpose of a woman is to have children, and her cousin, our protagonist, doesn't believe that and chooses or does not think she wants children. And also gender roles in marriage, and all that's fine to discuss. But I just think that we're bombarded with that, or I don't know if all women are, but I think it's just everywhere. Like those questions, those, people having different beliefs, which is fine. But I didn't want to read about it. I just wanted to read about a scary baby. So perhaps in that sense, it's not fair to say that it's like a bad book. I don't think it's a bad book. I think people do like to read about that discussion. I just think it was a little much. I think I was wanting more horror, and it just kept bringing up that discussion, and I was just kind of like, I don't want to read this. Now, there were some aspects of the book that were very thrilling and some that were gross, and I think that's what kept me intrigued. And it's also a very short read, so it's not like I had to read about this discussion that I just am already surrounded with so much that I had to read it forever, like a 500-page book. I did give it 2 stars because it just wasn't a book for me. I didn't want to read it. I was really relieved when it was over, but the cover is so cool. I had high hopes for it, and I went into it very blind. Maybe if I knew that all of these things are being discussed so much, I wouldn't have gone into it, or I wouldn't have read it. But I just prefer how other books kind of discuss those issues more. So I gave it 2 stars. The other book that I read, not in the month of June, in a previous month, was Between Silence and Shadow. This is my first ARC that I've ever received. It was so exciting to contact the author and let her know, that I wanted her book so bad. And I received the ARC. I did listen to it, and I had a really great time with it. I thought it was really fun, and I gave it 5 stars. This book is her debut, and I think looking back after reading it, I could see some things that I'm like, okay, I think I would change that a little bit, or maybe this was rushed. But this book is definitely leading up to a second book. We have a lot of unanswered questions. But in this book, we have our protagonist. I don't have the book with me. I don't remember her name. But she lives... There are 2 kingdoms that are... They're not at war. But this is post-war, and now there are these rules between these 2 kingdoms. And basically, these 2 kingdoms, the subjects of these kingdoms, cannot speak to each other. There's a law of silence. And this book is more like forbidden love, love at first sight, not enemies to lovers. And she has a power that she is learning about, and I feel bad, but I don't really remember what that was. My regret with this book is that I read it so fast. I think I was so excited. I read it so fast and did not fully absorb a bunch of the information of the book. It's also been a little while, so I don't remember the full plot of the book other than forbidden love. I just remember really enjoying the book. I wished for the author that it would blow up. I don't believe it has yet. And the author is T.J. Knight. By the way, I want to make sure that this is her debut. But on Goodreads, it only has 40 reviews and 49 ratings, but the book has a 4.57 star rating. And reading the reviews after I read it, I feel like the majority of people really love this book. So I hope for her that this blows up. And that more people read this book. I thought the concept was really interesting of these 2 kingdoms that can't speak to each other. Yes, this is her first book. Just wanted to make sure I'm looking at it on Goodreads. I also really appreciated that I spoke to the author, like I DM'd her, like letting her know how much I enjoyed her book. She contacted me back. I really appreciated that. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. But yeah, between Silence and Shadow, I think the cover was really cool. When I saw the arc on TikTok, I was so on board with getting that book and reviewing it for her. And I did buy her physical copy off Amazon so I can have it in my collection. I recommend it. Now, I think it is a book that I do need to brush up on a little bit since it has been a while, but I thought it was really fun. And I'm excited for her second book. It left on a cliffhanger. I do remember that and thinking like I want the second book already. So that was the book I read in a previous month. Now we're moving into June. The first book that I read in June was Fractal Noise by Christopher Paolini? Paolini? That's how you say it. I've never heard of this author. I've never seen this book. I picked it up at Walmart because it had an astronaut in the front cover and it sounded really interesting. I thought it was going to be like sci-fi, finding these aliens, survival. Again, it was not what I thought, but I was pleasantly surprised by this book. This book surprised me the most of the month. This book is not so much about finding aliens or, surviving in this other planet. It is about death and grief. It is a heavy book. So our protagonist has recently lost his wife. This is in the future. Other planets have been discovered that can, I'm saying this poorly. There are other planets that have been discovered that can sustain life, but he is on a mission to discover more planets, basically. And it's really interesting. I thought it was interesting to learn about the planet that he lives on, because he doesn't currently live on Earth. This planet has an anomaly that they're sending a mission from their spacecraft to go and explore. This book focuses a lot on philosophy, religion, God, and death. Our protagonist is depressed and he is working through his grief or deciding if he wants to work through his grief. So in that aspect, it's pretty heavy. There are thrilling moments in this book. They are on this other planet. There are things on that planet. And I guess I can't say too much more without spoiling it, but there is action. And at first, when I realized how heavy the book was, I was like, oh, this isn't what I expected. But the longer I read it, the more invested I got into our character and the more I appreciated the subject being spoken of. Because I do like books that talk about grief, that do talk about the heavy subjects, and, raised a lot of questions about the purpose, the meaning of life and all those things. But I really liked it. I thought it was really interesting. I liked the subjects that were being brought up, and I appreciated our protagonist. You really feel for him. And I gave it 4 stars. Now, in the book, this anomaly does create sound, and that sound is you have to read that word many times, and I will say that did get a little jarring to read. I don't remember if it was boom or some kind of, what are those words called? Onomatopoeia? Is that right? But over and over again. So I did not like that, but I did like our ending. It was a good book. Just know if you're going to read it, it is heavy, it is dark. But I do also like the subject of, you never know when you're going to see your loved one for the very last time. And, those I think are good things to be reminded of. And also regret. Our protagonist has regret, and he's living with those, trying to cope with them. And I liked it. I liked it a lot. And I'm curious about this author's other work. The other one that I've seen also seems like sci-fi. And I'm curious to know the subject matter that's spoken about in that novel. So that's the first book that I read in June. The next book that I read was The Island by Natasha Preston. I've thought about reading a Natasha Preston for so long because there's, in like every bookstore, I think when you think of like thriller, at like Walmart, they're like there, and Target, they're just very accessible. And The Island seemed like a cool summer read because it takes place on an island. And it is a thriller. I thought I would enjoy it. I really thought I was going to love this book. It is a book I have almost completely forgotten about. And not because it's been a long time since I've read it. A week later, I was like, oh yeah, like what was this book? It's a book I am totally fine with forgetting. We're following a group of influencers, which already, when I read that, I was like, do I want to read about a bunch of influencers? I already didn't like our characters, which might seem kind of funny, but when that's something you spend a lot of your time doing, and we don't like a lot of these influencers, I think it was just like, I kind of would rather read about someone who doesn't already do something that I spend a lot of time doing, which might sound silly, but that's how I felt. Our protagonist, though, I did like her because she likes dark things, and she has a podcast on true crime. They are all invited to go to this very prestigious island that is Gothic themed, and they are invited to go there and promote it on their social media platforms. Things go down at this island, and our protagonist kind of falls into the role of the investigator, trying to figure out what's going on and who did it. I just thought that some of the things that happen in this book were unrealistic. Now I know it's a book. Like, so many there's room for things to be really unrealistic, but certain things that happened, I was like, people would not respond in that way. That's not how that would actually happen. And other things that happened in the book, I was like, what? Like, where did this huge shift come from? Like, it didn't make sense for that character. It was like out of character. And I just couldn't wait to finish it and move on to another book. The only reason that it has 3 stars and not 2 is because the end, there was this little twist, or I guess a big twist at the very, very end, that I was like, oh, okay, I appreciate that. But the rest of the book, it was so... Nothing excited me about the book until the very end. I didn't care if any of these influencers died off. Like, it was just... I thought it was a bad book, honestly, and I don't see myself picking up another Natasha Preston. I think there are much better authors that write thriller, and yeah, didn't like it. I know a lot of people love her books, but I thought it was not good. Next book that I read was a classic, Lord of the Flies. I've never read this book. I enjoyed it. It is a 4-star for me. There's so much to dissect in this book. We're following a group of boys that crash land on an island, and there are no adults. And initially they think, this is great. Once they have to come to terms with, okay, they are trapped on an island, they're like, someone's gonna come save us, there are no adults, we'll be fine. This book kind of reminds me of the show Survivor. Alliances, nothing, you might all be one happy family at the very start, but then people start to disagree and break off into groups. This book is talking a lot about the defects in society and human nature. Okay, I'm struggling to talk about this book because I know that it's just classics. They're so jam-packed with symbolism, and I don't want to say something incorrectly, but this, or you know, not say enough, but this book is just so jam-packed. It talks about, we're talking about society and the flaws in human nature and in society, and how, the man can be evil, and how it just breaks apart. Them being on this island and trying to make it work, it's impossible for human nature to just coexist and be happy and everything to go great. You're going to have opposing sides. You're going to have people that break up into different, in the book they're like clans, and you have this one group that believes this way, this group that believes another way, and I enjoyed reading it and learning about the symbolism in the book. I think when you read it, you pick up on those things, but I liked to do research after the fact in case I missed anything, if something went over my head, because it's not just about boys getting trapped on an island and surviving. There's a lot of meaning within the book. And after I read the book, I did research, and I also watched a video kind of breaking down the book, but I'm not going to try to explain all of it. It is a good book. And I think I just described it very poorly, but I gave it 4 stars. I don't think it's my new favorite book, but I wanted to read it. I know it's a book that kids read in school, and I know is a book you should read. I enjoyed it. The next book that I read is a what do you call it? Middle grade book called Ghost Abbey. It's supposed to be horror thriller. It's not. It's a middle grade book. It was not scary. I read it more for just the atmosphere. I wanted it to seem spooky, but knowing I wasn't going to get something inherently scary. There's an abbey, and it's haunted, and this family is going to live there because they're having some money issues, and they are invited to live at this abbey and renovate it. In this book, we're talking a lot about family and relationships. I think a lot of it's geared a lot towards mother-daughter relationship, because our protagonist that we're following has lost her mother, and now she kind of has a mother figure, and the importance of that, I think, is brought up in the book quite a bit. That's what I got out of the book anyway. It was cute. It had a very cute ending. I liked the ending. Now, I don't know that I would really recommend this book. It is, maybe if you like middle grade, I've tried a few middle grades just to see if I like them. I gave it 3 stars. If I read a horror book, I want it to be scarier. But like I said, I did read it for the atmosphere, and that's what I got. I thought it was cute. I thought it was a cute middle grade horror. The last book that I read was the most disappointing of... It was the most disappointing, and that is The Return by Rachel Harrison. I loved Such Sharp Teeth by Rachel Harrison. Now, all those things that I didn't like in Just Like Mother, those discussions, I thought she handled so well in Just Sharp Teeth. Such Sharp Teeth. I don't know why that is so hard to say. I loved how she handled it. I thought that hit home for me. That book was so good. So when I saw The Return, and I've heard people speak about it, I was all excited. I was like, oh, this seems really creepy. You have this group of friends, and one of them has gone missing. Years later, these friends, they reunite, and this friend reappears. Things are off with their friend, and there are a lot of gross things that are described in the book with their friend. some of those things I was like, oh no. I really didn't like you. It's gross. It just didn't feel like the same author. But that being said, this is her debut. I didn't know that. Such sharp teeth came later, and I think I can tell that this is her debut. There were just things in the book, like the island, that I thought, this is not how someone would react in this situation. No. Or I think things should have been even more off with the friend that came back, other than things just being gross. I was waiting for it to get better. I kept waiting and waiting for the book to get better, and I was disappointed. I did like the messages that came with this book. We're talking about friendships, jealousy, being content with your life. That really came in to the book towards the end, and I did like that. I just found the plot to be anticlimactic. I just was like, what? I thought it was going to be so much better. And I thought it was going to be scarier, not just gross. And it just seemed like there were unanswered questions. So I gave it 2 stars. But I think I was just expecting so much more from this book than The Island. I was like, oh, this is going to be one of my new favorite books, that it was the most disappointing. So those are all the books that I read. And to be honest, it was not, as far as the June books, it was not the best reading month. Yeah. I've had months where I feel like I just read tons of great books, and this was just not one of those months, which is fine. So like I said, I'm still figuring out how I want to do the wrap-up of the month with my little template I'm creating here, this tracker, I guess. So we're just going to wrap up all of these books, June and the 2 that I did not read in June. So there were 8 books read, 7 were physical books, 1 was an audio book. Only 1 book got 5 stars, which I feel like is that's low. I read 1 classic. My favorite character was Alex Critchin, who was the biologist in Fractal Noise. That character I liked the most. I did not DNF any books. I think my favorite book within all, not just June, but within all of them, would be Between Silence and Shadow. Now, a book that I would rewrite would be The Return. I would, like I said, make it scarier, more realistic with how people responded to the friend, and maybe just speed up some things. I feel like there were some parts I was like, okay, let's just ask her what's wrong with her. It took too long. And change the ending. There's so much that could be better about that book. I would reread Between Silence and Shadow so that I could refresh my memory on what exactly the book is about. I know it's there, but it's not super clear. And I would burn The Island. For sure. Just burn it. I totally forgot that I had 3 physical copies, and I could have held them up while I was talking about them. So disappointing, because the cover's so cool. I love horror books that have pink covers, because other than horror, I feel like it's only romance that has pink covers, but when a horror book has a pink cover, it's so yummy. That's my June wrap-up. I'm going to do my July wrap-up very soon, because we're already in August. We're already almost halfway through August, which is insane. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Be on the lookout for the July wrap-up. We have a lot more books to talk about in July, because I read a lot more in July, and I read so many good books. I cannot wait to talk about them. Totally forgot how to wrap up a video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.